So it's great to see you. We appreciate you all showing up. Welcome to Roll a Perception Check, where we'll talk about our insights and our experiences, as well as what we think the intrinsic and extrinsic values of running a tabletop role-playing game, gaming club, specifically through the realm of D&D 5e, has been for us. So
we're going to use the conceit throughout that we're setting up a TTRPG. So session 0, we're rolling up our characters. I'm Chris. I'm a social studies teacher. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've played games my whole life, all kinds of tabletop games. And my favorite thing about RPGs are the bizarre and useless inside jokes that you come up with. So, we were talking about this in the ride up. I had a table play with an ever-flowing jar of mayonnaise in an adventure. A lot of fun. That's my very favorite thing, I think. Not that I like mayonnaise that much, but
I've got a podcast, and I call all of my listeners my little jars of mayonnaise.
all right.
So
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
All right, I am Malachi Storing. I'm a student at our school, and I've been participating in Games Club. This is my second year now, and I say that definitely my favorite part of any sort of tabletop roleplay game setting is the roleplay, is the interaction with the other players at the table.
Hi, my name is Theo Romanchuk, and I'm also a student. And my favorite aspect of role-playing games is definitely coming together as a community and telling a story.
my name's Peter Reynolds. I am a level 17 educator, lifetime gamer, Creek kid. I've got 4 levels of biology teacher, 5 levels of high school intervention coordinator, and then I've taken an 8-level dip in principal, which means I am your token soulless administrator. I'll allow all of you to conjecture whether or not my alignment is lawful evil. So, and really, I think I'd like to open up with a story about myself. So I told you I'm a lifetime gamer. I grew up with a group of 6 to 8 guys in high school, and they're the guys that I gamed with. We still game today as adults. Quick show of hands, do I have any parents in the room? Any parents? So I think this is going to make maybe a little bit more contextual sense to you. But somewhere in 2012, I'm out back. I'm cutting, splitting, and stacking wood, and I get a phone call, and it's my buddy Rob. And unfortunately, Rob's calling to tell me that our other buddy just lost his 1.5, 2-year-old son. And it's hard for you guys to know exactly what that's like if you've never been a parent. I'm sure that you've experienced loss in your lives. So the very first thing I did was I failed my will save, right? And as soon as I hung up the phone, I ran upstairs and I checked in on my own 1.5-year-old, 2-year-old son sleeping in bed, right? And so then what do? You start rolling insight checks because what you're really thinking about is how am I going to help one of my closest friends through this moment, right? And as adults, we all grow apart. Life happens. And so you grow up, you don't do the things that you love as much as you used to do. So over the course of splitting and stacking wood that summer, what I did was I determined I'm going to get us back together and we're going to start gaming. And that is how I'm going to help my buddy and help us through this moment. And so that fall, right, I started and ran a long-running, like several years running, 3.5E campaign. And what that did was it provided us a regular opportunity to get together, right, once a month, where we are laughing, where we're smiling, where we're in community with each other, where we can vent frustrations that we might have in life through experiences with the game, right? And the other thing it did for my buddy that lost his child, it provided him the comfort of a solid, structured rules and system, which is in stark contrast to just the brutal unpredictability that life sometimes gives us. And so, for me personally, right, I can tell you that I think that what you're doing here at this conference has value. That what you're doing in this conference is something that we can export to others, that we can use to help others to make that same difference that it's made in our lives. And I think it's also worth recognizing that if we can recognize the ways that this has shaped and helped us as adults, then it's also something that we could probably recognize has value or should be extended by invitation to our youth. And that really,
Yeah, I didn't start this from any sort of highfalutin point. I just like playing games. And I had a couple of kids who were interested in games, so they came to my classroom. Said, all right, let's do it. We started playing, we called it Games Club because I didn't know what we were going to end up playing. But Stranger Things was on the TiVo, so man, they wanted to play D&D. Let's do it. So we started playing D&D. We had like 4 kids coming to my room after school playing through a very silly adventure that I grabbed off the Dungeon Masters Guild called Yarrow's Super Happy Fun Murder Dungeon. If you are looking for a LARF, it is a Yarrow's Super Happy Fun Murder Dungeon. It's a good time. It was a blast. That's where the jar of mayonnaise came from. It was poisoning a fountain. But the kids knocked it off and took it, and now you got to deal with that. Anyways, 4 kids, that was perfect. And that grew to about 6 kids by the end of the year. We start up again the next year, I got 20. And 20 kids trying to play around a table is completely unmanageable in any tabletop role-playing game system I'm aware of. So I had a couple of choices. We could go to separate tables, but I didn't want that. I wanted these kids to play together. So I ended up coming up with a couple of little rules tweaks that have allowed very large groups of people to play tabletop role-playing games together. And that's one of my goals today, is to share that. I want the same opportunity that students at the school I work at have to play these games, to experience what these guys are going to tell you about from their perspective they're getting out of gaming. I want other kids all around to have that opportunity, and I feel like there might be educators who run into the same hard stop of, I got too many people to play this game. So that's my goal. By the end of the session, you'll have my rule changes in hands, and hopefully you'll be able to apply them or get them to somebody who can apply them. And please contact me with anything that you think is working or not working with that.
And one of our other goals, too, is to give you the educator's perspective on this. And there are some real tangible benefits that go beyond the goofy, silly fun that I had as a kid with my buddies and that I continue to have with as an adult. And so let's start with the basics, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. So we know, educationally, we know that we want to engender fluency with a basic set of skills in our students. And we're talking about ELA, different types of literacy. We're also talking about number sense, basic mathematical functions, okay? What I would contend is we also know through brain-based learning the value of the concept of mixed practice and spaced practice. Mixed practice being practicing different contents mixed in with each other, not solely monocropping your practice into one specific discipline at one specific time. And spaced practice being, we know that recall, conceptual understanding, it increases as practice is stretched out over a longer period of time. So what we have here then are students engaging in high interest, on demand, practice for basic number functions and fluency. So we're talking about math sense here. How many times have you, real quick, had to do the math in your head for hit points, totals, bonuses on a roll? How about things like ratios, proportions, chances, probability, percentile, skill checks, right? That's all great mathematical practice from an educational standpoint. And I'd also contend that having students read high interest things like source materials, players' handbooks, which often, by the way, include a rich, highly leveled Tier 2 academic vocabulary, is providing that spaced, mixed practice of these core academic skills that we're hoping to engender more fluency in our teens.
And I can speak to that through my experience in Dungeons and Dragons and with gaming, that I was never a math kid, but through D&D I have gotten much better at doing quick mental math and at doing basic arithmetic, and it's definitely become a profound part of my academic career, whether it be in math. In my math classes, I'm one of the only students who still knows how to do long division without a calculator and multiplication.
And that vocabulary aspect is also equally as important. Those source books and all the essence of just being at a table with your peers, having that conversation for a full session really builds all of that vocabulary skills that you need, not just the academic vocabulary, but also social vocabulary, the stuff that you use in conversation with your friends, your family, your peers. It's so important.
And as a social studies teacher, I do a lot of research with my students. One of the skills that I think is overlooked for these digital natives is how to actually access information in a text, right? So when I got a kid who's scrambling to find out the area of effect of their spell, they are going through the index like they know how an index works. I have a hard time getting kids to do that in books otherwise, right? It turns out that there's all these soft skills that we do in tabletop role-playing games that kids may not get exposed to because it's all search bar stuff. It's all Google search terms. Not that they're good at that either, but this is a valuable skill to practice, and it's one of those transferable skills that we're finding is super valuable.
And so another transferable literacy that we think is really key here is using a map, right? We exist in a time, and our students are growing up in a time where most of the navigation tools we use are egocentric navigation tools, right? That's what's ubiquitous in our time. So your iMaps, your Google Maps, your GPS, all of that navigation is occurring from you, and you're getting really discrete directions. Turn left now. Take this right. What tabletop role-playing encourages students to do is actually develop those allocentric navigational skills. So navigating and increasing spatial memory and spatial awareness based on descriptions, based on landmarks, that's a really critical cognitive step that will be transferred over to a lot of areas in our adult world. If you look, there's a fair bit of research out there that talks about the development of the hippocampus, right, which is where our spatial awareness, our spatial memory exists. We know that the more allocentric navigation you do, the greater hippocampal development that you have. We're talking about increased gray matter as well, not just increased blood flow to that area of the brain, but increased gray matter as well. And so we would contend that the mapping practice you get in a tabletop gaming experience or tabletop role-playing experience is promoting that hippocampal development, is increasing your spatial awareness and memory, is increasing the amount of gray matter that we have, as well as providing you with some pretty key transferable skills in the real world.
Yeah, so one of the other hats I wear is I teach our classes wilderness survival class. So I take kids out and leave them in the woods with a map and a compass. We do have to train them on that one, right? And that is definitely a skill that is not present for a lot of these guys. One of my favorite pictures I've ever taken out of my classroom shows my entire land nav class pointing at different objects completely lost, and they're in the front yard of the school. So it's really an important skill to have, even though we do live in a world with Google Maps. Some things are not on Google Maps. Sometimes you're not a place where you have your phone. There's a lot of reasons you should be able to think this way.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, we went the wrong way there.
But the aspect that I enjoy about Dungeons and Dragons and about world building is the world building aspect of it. And in my experience, world building and Dungeons and Dragons in general allows for my creativity and my young mind to run loose, and it allows me to express and develop my opinions and beliefs in a space that will accept them. And I believe that that is a powerful tool and a good experience for kids to have, because in the real world you are going to have to be creative and you're going to have to be able to think fast, and being able to practice that and develop those skills in a safe and reassuring setting is a very, very useful experience to have.
So let's talk about that real world, right? Our business is education. It is a product-driven business. We produce graduates. And what we're being called to do is produce graduates that are increasingly competitive in the changing future job market. So we know that businesses are reporting the in-demand skills of graduates for those jobs of the future include and put a premium on things like creative nonlinear problem solving, critical thinking. We would contend that the conditions of tabletop role-playing is encouraging a fast-paced, on-demand practice of nonlinear thinking, nonlinear problem solving, creative problem solving, and critical thinking. And it goes beyond just the regular encounters or figuring out your encounters, let's talk about the critical thinking that would go into action economy, right? The critical thinking that would go, or the executive function that would go into resource allocation. These are all things that we know employers are saying they want their future employees equipped with and well versed at. We contend this is a great way to help develop those skills. And the other big 21st century skill, and perhaps it's antiquated now to say 21st century skill, but the other big future job market skill we know that employers are telling us they want kids coming out of school equipped with is the ability to collaborate, to effectively work within a group, to confront and solve sometimes ill-defined problems, and to be able to communicate different ideas and rationalize different ideas, or get some type of meshing of those different ideas. Those are key critical skills, right? Think about the pictures you see of the open workspaces back when Google and the Google model was a big thing. We're all talking about communication and collaboration. I'll be honest with you, I can't think of a more an environment where communication and collaboration are more important than a tabletop role-playing session. And so we would contend that that provides a really critical, great area to practice that.
And I mean, from my perspective, all that's well and good, but the thing I really like to see is how my students socialize, right? There's not a ton of things in the school that reach across age levels. There's not a ton of things that reach across cliques. Game club does. I got kids coming from every walk of life in that building, from every grade in that building. I got kids coming to play games who are not in my building, right? We're 7 through 12 in one building. I've got 5th graders coming up to play from the elementary, and everybody plays well together in an environment that is unique in education. That doesn't happen anywhere else. It doesn't happen in sports. It doesn't happen anywhere. It doesn't happen in the lunchroom. And this is an awesome experience that I get to share with these kids where they get to interact with one another. Face to face, sitting around a table, right? Coming out of COVID, we spent so much time on Zoom, so much time on screens. It is so wonderful to see these kids practicing being children around each other, face to face, and watching each other hear what they say, right? Like talking is one thing, banging something out on your computer is one thing. Actually watching somebody hear your words is another thing, and that is a skill and that is an experience that I don't know that kids get a ton of. And it does happen with this. Again, this is an amazing opportunity for students.
So let's talk about failure. We know that failure is a critical part of the learning process. We also know that there are a lot of things in life that are not going to work out the way that you thought they were, right? Having the emotional resiliency and the emotional or cognitive coping skills and strategies to deal with adversity, when something doesn't work out the way that you thought it would, or how about low stakes loss, such as the death of a PC? Those are important skills that we're going to use in the adult life. We would contend that the tabletop role-playing environment provides students with a safe place to hone that, and even a low stakes environment to hone those skills. Emotional resiliency, coping with loss, dealing with failure.
Yeah, I recall the first time I had a PC die at one of my tables, and I was not sure how that was going to roll out. I don't think that it ever happened. They were brand new to the game. And it was surprisingly cool. Like, everybody was bummed, and then we came back with a new character next week, right? It was a great opportunity to model how to deal with things not going right, and to have those real consequences, which are fairly rare in education. We've got a lot of extra chances, which is wonderful. But it's also good to know that you won't always have those extra chances, and sometimes things just don't work. Which brings us to long-term thinking. One of the things that I've noticed around the tables that I'm running in this club is that kids get nervous, and then they start cracking jokes, and they start trying to be funny, and they start saying dumb stuff, and that can just really just ratchet up pretty fast. What's wonderful in Dungeons and Dragons is when you say that horrible thing, the NPC hears you, and they can remember it, right? That can actually come back to bite you in the butt. I get to impose consequences for kids' actions and for kids' words that are sometimes, and I would argue often, lacking elsewhere. Right? You can say pretty much whatever you want, but in my world, my NPC is going to hear it. When you choose to use your breath weapon on that receipt in a crowded restaurant, you're going to burn people. That's going to cause problems. We got to deal with those problems later. I love having an opportunity to help kids work through that sort of decision making and that sort of impulse control in an environment where actually nobody has to get burnt alive. That's very good to me. I'm going to pass it off to,
Well,
yeah.
you know, the educators speak here as executive function. We talk about how one of the difficult things when we're working with young children is impulse control. We also know and recognize in brain development how those parts of your brain that allow you to cognitively conceive of things in the long term are not fully developed until well after your teens. Yet in an educational setting, we're constantly frustrated that we're seeing teens exhibit low impulse control. We're seeing teens not effectively plan for the future. We're seeing teens thinking just in the now, not in the long term. So having a safe place that allows them to develop those skills, experiment with and experience some consequences for short-term biased thinking and decision-making versus accounting for the long term is an incredibly valuable thing in our mind.
And that impulse control is really important because it really helps you be ready to be able to go into modern society. That impulse control is so vital, so very vital.
So you've heard a lot of our feelings as adults and how this impacts our students. Theo and Mally have been great about giving kind of their insights around that structure, but now what Chris and I want to do is frankly shut up and let the kids talk to you.
And the aspect of gaming and of role-playing games that I find to be most important is the fact that it gives kids and gives people power over their character. And I feel that in most of students' lives and in teens' lives, they don't have a lot of power. Even at school, they are at the whim of their teachers, and at home, they have to do what their parents say. And that can become frustrating, and I know it has for me at times. So being able to go to Games Club and go to a space where I have some power, right? I make this character and I get to say what they do, and I get to have a part in saying what the people at my table do, is an amazing experience because it allows me to become less stressed, and it allows that amazing feeling of, having some of that power given back to you.
And another really important thing about a space like this is just the voice that it gives to children. That experience where you're in that room with your peers, and it's so low stakes if you mess up. It allows you to experiment with your own identity. Who are you gonna be? Who do you want to be? That's so important.
And I can tell you that we've got teachers and faculty members who come and play at these tables with student DMs sometimes, right? So to talk about that power dynamic, to talk about that environment where kids get a chance to experiment with how they would behave or how they want to be or who they want to be. The idea of a teacher playing a tabletop game with a student as the game master is amazing. Like, that is just such an interesting thing to see when it plays out that way. But I'd mentioned earlier on that I've got, running this club, a real problem of too many players, right? Too many kids interested. I have a problem of riches, an embarrassment. So Mal's coming around with my rule modification. And I'll just real quick go over a couple of the high points here. I assume everybody here can read, so I won't insult you by reading the thing aloud. I would like to just take a moment, if you don't mind, to appreciate how much this looks like a 5E textbook. It took me a long time to fudge that. I had to do a lot of work trying to match the fonts and the colors and download weird clip art to put behind it. That's all I want, is just a moment to respect that.
The guilt trip is ineffective.
Yeah, guilt is an extremely effective educational tool. All right, so with 20 kids playing this game, I need to figure out a way to get them all to play together, right? They can't all play at one table. That is completely unmanageable. So the solution I hit upon was kind of a wheels within wheels method. I created a new position, a DMM, a Dungeon Master, who is the master of the Dungeon Masters, right? And I would set a setting for this adventure arc to take place in, and I would set a goal. And then I got students to be my DMs at the various tables, and they all set their adventure arcs within my overarching setting. The first year, the player characters, there's again 20 odd of them, washed up on an island and had to go through a series of fetch quests to get a stone to unseal this thing that was supposed to solve the problem, but because of my twisted soul was actually a heel turn to release a horrible evil god that they had to fight in the end, right? This year, we're in a heist, so we got a walled city, and they're trying to rob some stuff. And everybody, all of my DMs are running a separate gang within this city. So I set the overarching story, I set the boundaries, and then the DMs take off from there, and they run the tables. Now, the thing that is different is that all of these tables, the action on them is happening simultaneously. So I work really hard to make the kids playing at this table feel like they are playing in the exact same universe at the exact same time as the kids playing at this table. So we share things like NPCs. The back of our shared adventure arc document has NPC lists with names and also with actors. So I got Danny DeVito playing one of them. That way everybody knows what this guy looks like, how this guy talks. We can all refer to this person consistently. Because my player characters talk outside of Game Club about what they did at their table. So they might meet this guy in one context, you know, my other table might meet him in a different context. I want that to line up. I want these kids to have the impression they're playing in the same universe. We also conference the Dungeon Masters at the end of each session conference so that any actions that you guys take in your table that could impact these guys they're aware of, right? So if you whack somebody, then he's got to be dead over here too, right? Because if he's still walking around, we got real continuity problems. Now, nothing's perfect, right? But we're trying to create that illusion of simultaneity because that keeps all of these kids not separate but together. And in order for the adventure arc to follow the structure of an adventure arc, there has to be that big baddie at the end, right? But combat with 20 kids taking turns, we would get through one round and then that'd be the end of it. So I came up with a different rule variation there. That's combat for the very large table. I had all of my players roll a persistent initiative. So you would have initiative 15, let's say, and you would have 16. And that initiative is going to follow you. Now, I run the big baddie at my table, perhaps, and then my DMs would run a henchman over here and a henchman over there. And you as players can float around. You can attack where you think your skills are most needed, and on your initiative, you can move. So if you're fighting me, but like somebody's going down over here, you can, on your initiative, use your move action to go to that table. It is chaos. There's kids screaming for help. It is just mayhem. And if anybody ever leaves a monster with no player character attacking him, that monster can join a different table, right? So that monster can come onto my table, and now you got to fight the baddie and the henchman. It's unreal, but it's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to end our session right before summer break. So that's all there. Again, I won't read it out loud. You guys can figure it out, and probably can make it a lot better than I did. I just, if you flip it over to the other side, I threw out a couple of things that worked for me for setting this stage for kids to all play together. One is those natural boundaries, again, an island or a walled city. I want to keep them close enough that they're all interacting with the same people, but not so close that they're bumping into each other, because that's really awkward. They can't do that conveniently. And then I want to encourage you, if you're thinking about doing this, I want to encourage you to not ignore the humble fetch quest, right? They are super annoying when you got to go and fetch this and go there and fetch that. But these are going to be separate kids, and their adventure is going to be one fetch, maybe two fetches. The fetch quest works really well in this context. It worked really well for us the first time we ran through on the getting the magical stone one. And then as the DMM, my big goal is to make notes of what people encounter and what people do. If you insult that NPC in session 1, I want that guy to be upset at the final battle and not offer his help. I want kids to feel like, again, actions that happen at this table have impacts when we fight that big baddie at the end. It's fun. That makes it engaging. I think that makes it a little bit more real. I would guess that 8 out of 10 of my players have never touched a dice before they come to Games Club. We worked really hard to make this welcoming. One of the big mistakes that I made, and I put that under dealing with new PCs and new DMs, is that my first year dealing with this huge number of kids, I kept most of the noobs to play at my table, and I figured, well, I'll teach them how to play the game, and then they can go to another table. We tend to do it in the fall, and then in the spring we shift tables at that point. That was a terrible idea because I had a bunch of kids who didn't know how to play a game, trying to play a game. Nobody knew what to do, right? I could teach them which dice to roll, but they didn't know how to play an RPG, and that was really unnatural. So I thought that went badly enough that I wanted to warn anybody who was thinking about this against it. I encourage you to create those mixed ability tables where you can have skilled players modeled for the kids who are new. It's a lot more fun. The most important thing on this piece of paper, though, is the very last thing where it says contact us. If you are at all interested in doing this, or if you do this and you figure out a better way to do this, or if you know somebody who might be interested in doing this, offering a game club to a very large group, please reach out to me. I want this to, the reason we're here is I want more people to do this. I want more kids to have this opportunity. So if you run one of these and you got a rule variant, please let me know. I want to get better at this. If you do something that doesn't work, please let me know. I want to fix it. And again, if you know anybody who is an educator who is into this, please pass this on.
So, a couple of last thoughts. One of the cool things about coming down here and hanging out with you today is that it provided me as a principal an opportunity to hang out with a couple of students in a context that was very different than what I typically do. So we had some real conversation and epiphanies that I have, right, as a lifelong educator and an administrator. The first thing that jumps out to me is in the conversations that we had yesterday coming down and in hearing the points that Theo and Mally are making, we cannot overstate the importance of the students' observance of how having an authentic sense of agency or a space where they feel they have an authentic sense of agency, especially within a structure that typically has an asymmetric power dynamic like school, that is critically important for the student's experience. We know, right, the clinicians in the room would know that self-determination theory tells us that authenticity, agency, that ability to have pursuit of mastery, and a sense of belonging, those are all critical for a fulfilling existence. And I would say that in school, right, the zeitgeist of education currently and good educational practice, good instructional practice, is to try and incorporate agency or student choice into instruction. But I think, for me, that sometimes an experience like this helps me realize how contrived we are at trying to come up with that agency when it's compared to a situation where students really feel an authentic sense of agency and autonomy in their experience. Big epiphany for me listening to these guys on the way down and being able to engage with them through this. Second thing that I think I've heard overwhelmingly, we know, and we talked about this a little bit, we know that the teenage years are critical to identity formation. We know that part of what's going on in our teenage years is we're trying lots of identities on, figuring out which pieces of which identities are actually parts of our core being. And I think overwhelmingly we've heard how a TTRPG experience provides a really safe place to do that. Big thing in New York right now is creating a safe and welcoming environment, right? And acknowledging the place that diversity and equity of instruction have in our world. And so hearing the comments of these two young men on the way down and through this experience reinforce how TTRPGs in the context of school can provide that safe and affirming place to try on different identities. The last thing I'll say is this. Again, as clinicians and professionals, we know the research is telling us the levels and the rates at which teens are experiencing generalized anxiety disorders, depression, stress, those are all increasing, right? Those are all increasing sharply. I think it's okay for us to acknowledge also the inherent value in giving kids a safe place to have some silly fun. What do I love about gaming with my buddies as a grown-up? I get to have those stupid, silly jokes with my buddies, similar to how I did growing up. And what we're saying is that that's also a really valuable experience to provide kids. Think of everything that they encounter on social media. Think of what the 24-hour news cycle is like. Think of what our current political system is modeling for our young people. Can we also acknowledge how just giving them an opportunity to have some silly fun is a great thing? So that's our story, and we'd like to let you guys roll an investigation check right now and fire away with any questions that you have.
Yeah.
So you said you have some fifth graders that join you guys sometimes?
Yeah.
Do you do any, so I'm a fifth grade teacher. I tried
Yeah.
D&D last year. There's a lot of reading.
Yeah.
I switched to Savage Worlds this year to try and simplify the system, but do you do anything different when you had fifth graders with you?
So the fifth graders I had come to me were, they were not this was not the first time they'd encountered Dungeons and Dragons. There's kids. So if that makes sense, right? But I will say that 5e does not make a great deal of sense for this. It's just what was popular. They wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to play Dungeons and Dragons. I would say we are not playing by the book, right? I make a point in here about Rule of Cool. We're all the way playing Rule of Cool. We're just trying to have a good time. And I do got rules lawyers, and so for the fifth graders, modify the crap out of it, man. The fun thing is to play the game. It doesn't, the rules are, screw it. They don't matter to anybody. But I've got some rules lawyers who would much prefer to play, well, it says right here. Great. Go start your own table, which is what I want you to do. You come here to play this game, which is the modified fun version. If you want to be that rules lawyer, you want to really get into it, you want to do the math, awesome. Start your own table and play and get other kids like that. That would be a win for me. You don't got to leave. You can still play here, but if you want to play that way, go. So I would encourage you just to modify the crap out of whatever you get, right? Anything you're playing where kids are doing this thing gives you the benefits. The rule system is immaterial.
So my observation of watching my own young children interact with gaming, what I would tell you is this. Show them what a game is, right? Give them a positive gaming experience or two. But then if you really want to see wild stuff happen, tell them to create their own game and then back off. For me, watching my son make his own games, write his own campaigns, create his own maps, right? There is some really high-level cognitive functioning and planning that's occurring when he's putting the thought into that, right? Is it around a silly fantasy narrative? Yeah, but who cares, right? Because if he can do that, creating his own campaign or even his own rules system, those are transferable skills in later. So that you want to get fifth graders going, show them a positive gaming experience with something that's easy, something that's accessible. The T-Turtle games, right? Here to Slay, stuff like that. And then say, hey, you make a game. You know what I want you to do? I want you to make a rules-based simulation that explores the World War II history unit that we just did, right? That is when young minds really, really take off in a gaming experience. At least that's what I've seen as a parent.
I wanted to ask about behaviors. Great thing to ask the principal in the room. But, I feel like the facilitating of groups I've done, just regular groups, we've run into phone problems with, people being obsessed over their phones or taking pictures and annoying others. And then we had a pretty rich conversation yesterday in here about other types of behavior. So when certain kids are like very disruptive and those kind of behaviors, and when you give them warnings, and then like if you have a set of rules when they walk in, and then when they might have to be asked to leave.
So, because I've got students doing the DMing, one of the things that, like, one of those soft skills that I'm hoping they get is how to manage that, right? But it's unfair to ask kids. I've got a kid who's in, what grade is that shit? 8th? Yeah, I got a kid who's in 8th grade who's DMing a table with, I don't even know. They could be seniors. I have no idea. One's a teacher, right? Like, it's unfair to ask them to manage those. Almost all of our kids are very grateful to be sitting at that table and to have a good time. I've had 2 experiences over the 2 years that were negative. I got one kid who is a dynamo. He's just driven by a spring. He is a world of chaos. The first session this year, I was hoping he might have grown a little bit. Spent the entire session unconscious because he was trying to murder everybody, right? Like, I would feel bad about that, and I would intervene on that one, but he seems to enjoy that role of just being an agent of chaos, so okay, just be an agent of chaos. I let that one play out. Last year I had a kid who said some pretty nasty stuff at a table, some misogynist stuff. We've adopted a policy this year. We don't have posted behavior rules. This is kind of a free play space, but we've adopted a rule this year of an X card, which is you can swap that X card that ends it, right? And swatting that X card and not ending it brings me over, which is no fun, right? So we want this to be student run. Thus far this year, that young man's been fine. I don't know. I don't know if there's like a simple response to that. There's danger when you let kids do what kids want to do. Hopefully the game is in high interest enough to keep them focused.
Yeah. So the administrator's perspective on behavior, right? First of all, please understand, we're running an extracurricular game. This is kids at one, right? And so desire to be at something, that little aspect of intrinsic motivation is a huge behavior modifier procedures, right? And really, that's why we drop back to this slide, because what you're talking about there is I want to be a part of this social experience, but if I'm a jerk to mailing, then I have to deal with those real consequences at the table or within the context of this social experience that I want to have. So outside of the clinical setting, right, that real natural, hey, we're going to teach you that your words, your actions socially at a table have consequences. You're going to figure it out if you want to be a part of this, right? That plays out. I would say a huge thing is the culture of your school, right? Culture is going to eat your rules for breakfast. If you are experiencing behavior problems in your school, then the first place that you need to start is the school culture. And that culture is installed from day one, from the first minute. That culture is installed by your bus drivers, by your cafeteria workers, by your aides, by your teachers, by your secretaries. And I would start with, how are you interacting with the students? And are you modeling the same behavior and culture you want them to engage with at that table?
I would have stepped in on that one.
Yeah.
I think that's really powerful for us, is that this experience has always been, and has the reputation of being, a very warm and welcoming place for people to be weird at. So we tolerate a pretty high level of weirdness, but kids are going to screw up that border between being weird and being hurtful, right? So there's a couple of like nudges, and then we have to have those consequences, but those consequences are in the context of extracurricular, right? These kids don't have to be there, they want to, and if they can't behave, then they gotta bounce. And again, we only had the one kid,
Well, the situation we were talking about yesterday was actually in a community center. So it was someone that was doing a game in a community center that the kids didn't even know each other. And I think that's where the challenge was that they were getting.
Because there's not a culture yet, right? It's hard to play on that when the culture is not established.
Right, and there was only one adult. So I think the other thing is you have like a mix of casual adults in the room.
Only occasionally, right? It's what teachers can. Not a lot of people are willing to spend an hour after school playing games, right? So when teachers drop in, they play. It is usually just me in the room.
And what about phones? That was my other question. Is it a problem ever?
One of the things that annoys the crap out of me as a player is when I'm given my time to play this game and you can't be bothered to be interested in it, so you don't know it's your turn for a minute. That annoys the snot out of me. So I'm pretty hardcore on you get this many seconds to figure out what you're doing on your turn and then we're moving on. A lot of my kids use the phone to look up their spells. A lot of my kids use their phone for character sheets. So I don't have a problem with it. We're not a hardcore no phone school, and I'm not a hardcore no phone teacher. I don't really care. If you need to work and have a phone, whatever. It's not worth me dying on that hill. So I don't have a problem with that. But I think, again, that comes back to what kind of culture you have, what kind of relationship you have with your kids. I think it's tough to ask kids to be open and vulnerable and meaningfully participate in a game where they play pretend in front of strangers if they didn't have any relationship with each other yet. I think that's a really steep ask. I think as adults we would find that awkward.
So a session 0, right? Sounds like a simple thing, but if you employ a session 0 at your community center to give those kids a chance to build some community, to get to know each other, and do some basic team building before you get into gameplay, that also might do wonders for that situation.
So going off to session 0, are you running your players through any kind of consent or social contract? Are you telling them hey, look, this is how we're going to do, and everybody you got normal school rules apply. However, when you're playing, step on somebody else's turn, this kind of stuff. I mean,
I should.
That's really smart.
That's a good idea.
I mean, even with adults that you haven't played with, that's not the same group or whatever. You usually go through that kind of stuff.
I should.
Things. So it's hey, look, my dog just died. Please don't have us, killing the animals or anything or whatever, and that kind of stuff.
I don't, and that's a really good idea. So I will moving forward. The way it works is, a lot of kids don't know that they want to play Dungeons and Dragons, or they want to know they don't want to play games until their friend is talking about this amazing experience they had where they got to whatever arm wrestle a dragon, and now they know they want to. So we tend to have kids drop in and drop out, which is another reason for the 5th grade teacher why we play loosey-goosey, because I don't have a stable party, right? And I always run up 6 rando characters for that drop-in kid so that they can just jump right in and play and they don't got to worry about rolling up something. So there's a limited utility there, but creating that culture for the hardcore kids who know they want to be a part of it is a really strong move, and I like that idea.
When you have these mixed tables of people of different ages and different ability so far because they've been playing different times, do you find that you get somebody young or even an older person in there that they think that they're going to control, they're in a video game, that the table self-corrects because it's come on, knock this off.
I do. Yeah. I see the kids modeling good interaction skills, and that is awesome, right? Because and I don't want to. I don't know. I'll say it anyways. These are not necessarily always the kids who you're going to expect to have that suite of really perceptive social skills, and they do very well. We've had a couple of times that go wrong, and I've had to intervene or I had to talk to somebody, but by and large, the students want to do this. This is, I think, for the reasons that these guys described, this is a popular thing, and they don't want to screw it up, and they see people having a good time, and that mixed age thing, I think, really works well because the young kids see the older kids engaging openly and in this, again, very vulnerable moment.
Yeah, I'll tell you, as an administrator, if I want to get the best out of students in terms of character and behavior, I put them in a leadership role with younger kids, right? You would be amazed at what happens when you take a student and you say, go down to the elementary school and help with this. right? Or, hey, I got this going on. I'm dealing with these little kids. I want your help, right? I can use that on the bus. Um, you know, a lot of your students are coming from backgrounds where they may be responsible or interacting with younger siblings. They probably already have a pre-installed skill set for that. And you'll actually, in my experience, you tend to get a little bit more of the positive quality of character and leadership from students when they're interacting with individuals that are younger than them when they're not their direct siblings, right? Like speaking as a guy that's got a younger sister, 9 years younger than him. Growing up, sometimes it was easier for me to be cool with the little kid that wasn't my little sister than it was for me to go home and be cool with my little sister. So.
So you talked about how you have the students, BGMs at each table. Is there like specific stuff you look for in a person to put them in that position of like?
They're willing. That's a big one. Inevitably, as we go through a year, I'll have a kid stick around after the session and say, I would really like to dungeon master. And I'm totally happy to work with that kid. We've got again, so far my youngest is an 8th grader, and I've had kids do it, I mean, as late as senior year, right? It's a short, we play it for an entire half of a school year. So we play till Christmas on one DM's table, and then we switch tables and we go for the spring to a different DM's table. It stretches for 5 months, right? But in reality, it's like a 13-page story arc because of how slow everything goes and how it works. It's not a huge investment. It is an amazing feeling, I think, for a lot of these kids to run that. And it's also been very rewarding to me to watch kids who think that they're pretty sure what's going on struggle because they didn't do the prep work that I told them they were going to have to do in order to be successful. Again, those natural consequences in a low-stakes environment where nobody gets their leg broken is very cool. Right. Both these young men have DM'd or are DMing or will DM for me in the coming session, so they could speak to some of that as well. But no, just that you're willing, and I'm happy for you to DM. However, we've got really cool groups. We've got really cool kids. We have an amazing school district, I think, and everybody seems to be happy to work with each other to make this work.
I have 2 questions, one for the 2 of you, one for the 2 of you. For you two, could you talk to me more about what do you 2 do to target executive functioning skills in the kids that you work with?
So on a macro level, we have systems and structures designed in our school to reinforce the need to have good executive function. Right, so now I'm speaking outside of the context of a games club. Turns out don't do this or I'll punish you is a really terrible way to motivate people or teach people, right? And yet BF Skinner reigns supreme in 2 really fantastic large institutions in our lives, that being prison and education, okay? So what we try and do is we try and say, hey, instead, here are the qualities or the things that we need you to do, and when you demonstrate those, here are the different ways that we are going to reward you. Here's how we're going to make your life better. So we have a tiered system of privileges in our school, right? Whereby as students demonstrate to us behaviorally and in their academics that we can trust them, we give them more freedom and responsibility. So by the time kids get to be seniors in my school, they basically have a completely open campus, right? What kids learn coming up through our younger grades is what it takes to earn that freedom and responsibility. And so at a macro level, having a tiered system of privileges that students can earn or access by figuring out executive function has done well for us. I would say that we have a success rate at about like 80 to 85% of our students, just at a tier 1 level of that being a really great learning tool. That's supplemented by some things like academic eligibility for extracurriculars, including athletics. That helps, right? And then we have some support structures that are designed to, through different increasing levels, address the fact that you're not exhibiting executive function, right? So we maintain a list, we call it our guided study hall list, whereby if you blow an assignment or classwork, right, we've got people whose job it is to have a PhD and being a pain in your butt. And when you come into study hall, it's not an unstructured time. It's those people, right? And you take a hit on your privileges, your flexibility, and your freedoms on any given day or week when you're on that list, okay? So that for us helps kind of teach it in the day-to-day macro level structures of our school.
Within the context of the game club, you know, if you'd have asked me at the end of last year's session, I would have said, I just let that happen, right? It grows like the grass in the context of a game. But this year, it was our first session where we were actually playing, which means I've got all 25 kids sitting around this table. Some of them are on couches, some are on the floor, some are on chairs, just as you can. And we're just going around the table. You want to do something, you tell me what you want to do, right? And it happens. So we're role-playing, and a young man, I think I mentioned this, got angry at a receipt, which he thought was unfair. So he was a Dragonborn, he decided to breathe on it. And he's in this huge crowded room, he kills a bunch of people, right? He has definitely caused some pretty substantial ruckus in this small town. So my message to him was, and my message to all the players at that moment, look guys, what you tell me you're going to do, you do. And what you do has consequences, like, and I made that very explicit, and that was the first time I had done that, and I think that's a good thing. I think that needs to happen more often. And what I said about kids having lots of chances, I'm happy about you passing my test when you pass my test, right? Demonstrate to me that you know the stuff. You've demonstrated to me that you know the stuff. I don't care when you do it. There's lots of different chances. I'll give you so many chances. I'll meet you halfway. You want to do it? We'll do it. What's pleasant about this context of the game club is there can be consequences, and I can be a jerk, and I can say, you did this thing, that's it, man, there's no more chances, which we all learn that lesson. We tend to learn that lesson the hard way. This is that beautiful opportunity to have that lesson be made abundantly clear in a way that doesn't hurt anything but feelings. I'm very into that. That is, so that's my answer to that one.
Cool. And then the two of you. So what do you two particularly feel is important for adults who are running D&D games for teenagers to know going in during what happened?
Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking. I wasn't going to.
Oh. So I think it's really important to definitely try and give your kids as much autonomy as you can allow them, if not more than what they normally get, because that is really what makes this program so special. That level of being able to self-regulate amongst students, for students, by students, is just so powerful and important to understand just how much that does for the atmosphere, for the behavior, for every aspect of all of it.
I would say something similar, but I play D&D for the story. I like story building. I like writing stories. So the thing I enjoy that I used to find annoying as a DM, because I've almost always been a DM, is that when a player would come to me with like a 4-page backstory going into extreme detail about everything their character has ever been through, I used to find that annoying. But now I'm like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, do that, please. I want you to like get into it. I want you to understand and want you to be in depth about your character, because that's what I enjoy about D&D, and I want other people to enjoy that too. So I would say that don't tell your characters that they're doing too much or that they're like trying too hard.
Be prepared for those kids who do want to do more.
Oh, so I run a D&D club for teens at my local library, and one of my players, he came in, he had a full, rather short backstory for the character, and then he made an entire family tree for his character, which is hilarious because the character is a grandfather. Wow. And now that his grandkittens, his grandkittens are of age, he's going off to be an adventurer, and he says, well, here's this family tree.
Nice. You better make sure they show up in the adventure, right?
Well, long and short, A, one of them has already, the other would have if he had to leave for college.
Ah, that's a bummer.
I was getting ready to bring in the next one.
Yeah. I think our best formed character was a caveman. We had somebody playing a ranger, but they played the ranger as if he was a caveman with a sling. His name was Grug. Grug survived the adventure last year. I was so glad. He was real close to death at the end, but Grug made it. I wanted to frame Grug's character sheet, but the kid wouldn't let me keep him. But he went off to college as a senior, and he's playing there, right? Like the things that we're doing, they say tennis is a lifetime sport, or swimming is a lifetime sport, right? This is a lifetime sport. Like we're all sitting here because we came to this game or a game like this as kids. Our kids aren't doing that anymore. Our kids aren't getting together. Our kids aren't running into each other in public spaces where they get a chance to play that game. This is my son. I got to drive him around if he wants to play D&D with somebody. That doesn't always happen. We have to step in to offer this experience in the place where kids are with their friends, right? Which for us is a school. And getting those kids started lets them take it and run with it, like Pete said about his kids making their own game. Getting kids started in this lifetime sport, then if they want to go play it on Discord, knock yourself stupid. But realize that you're playing with another human being, which is what I can do in the school, right? Again, I want people to adopt this. I want people to do this for the reason that it's so powerful. Yeah.
I actually have a question. So, one of the things that you said earlier was one of your pet peeves is when somebody, when a kid or something, just doesn't know it's their turn, because they're not paying attention, disinterested, disengaged, whatever. So, not that, I don't really work with kids or anything. It's kind of more of a personal question, but that's something that I struggle with.
Yeah.
I'm definitely an ADD kid, and I'm interested in the game, I'm sitting there playing, and then the next thing I know, I'm just kind of doing one of these and everything. Now, I'm assuming you probably run into that with children. How do you mitigate that? And is there anything that you recommend to kind of do to maybe keep the children's involvement and attention that maybe I can even implement myself?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do is I try to make my initiative order pretty transparent, right? I'm not hiding anything. I want you to know where I'm playing and when your turn's coming up. I feel like it's unfair to ask kids to be prepared to make a split-second decision when they have no idea that that's happening, right? So I try to make that super transparent. The other thing I do is, and I haven't done it because we've had copier issues for 3 months, but I've got a sheet that shows the action economy on the one side, and then on the other side, because I'm dealing with so many new players, what the dice are called and what you use them for. Because I've just, one of the things, again, this is one of those things that just you've been playing this game for 30 sessions. You should know what the D20 is, man. At this point, it's the single most useful dice. You should know this one. So I've got this little list. I haven't handed them out yet because I haven't been able to, but stuff like that helps. The other thing that I have done, and maybe this is cruel and unusual punishment, but I've been look, man, you got 30 seconds. It's supposed to be a 6-second turn. All these actions are supposed to be happening simultaneous. When you're spending 5 minutes sorting out what you want to do, that breaks that continuity. So I've put on a time limit, right?
I saw that you had it on the sheet here. Are you just bumping them in initiative?
Yeah.
Or are you just you missed your turn?
No, I wouldn't do that necessarily unless they were really annoying to me.
Okay.
But so if for whatever reason you're unable to make your decision on initiative 15, then initiative 17 goes, and now your new initiative is 18, right? So I bump you down there, and that gives you that time to go. It might come with some real world penalties. That monster might attack you or whatever. But my goal is for you to want to be engaged, right? And I understand that that's not always possible for everybody, right? But we can't play the game unless everybody's playing the game.
So there's, as educators, right, there are little things that we try and do to hack that. Proximity, right? Where you sit will greatly influence your level of engagement. So if you yourself are struggling to stay engaged, sit right next to the DM. Or sit right next to your favorite player.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's usually if I'm sitting around, I'll put the camera on myself for a second. If I'm sitting around a table with people, I'm usually pretty engaged.
Yeah.
I'm there, but a lot of
the remote.
all of my games now are all over Zoom.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
You know, because some people just gotta live far away, but it's more convenient.
Sure,
for everybody.
sure.
But again, it's usually goes the remote games around.
For sure. But I would say about that, about the proximity thing, I've got a young lady who plays, she's a senior this year, she receives special ed services, and this young lady struggles with math. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on, but she always sits right next to me. Like, you know, my DM screen's here, she's like right here in my armpit. And the reason she's right here in my armpit is that, like, when I can see she's struggling to do the math of adding up, you know, her bonus plus her die roll, I'll just be like, oh yeah, it's 14. Right? Because I didn't even notice I was doing it. I was just doing it to speed things up. But she started using me as a crutch, right? So, like, being sensitive to those sorts of things, especially for kids who are dreading the math part. I still want her to play. You know what I mean? So, like, that proximity thing, having a student leader, a kid who's like, you know, laser Grug, my caveman, right? Having him sit next to you, your turn, buddy. You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that. I've seen that happen around the table. The kids, as Mal said, they run this thing because it's their show.
Yep. Also, if I can add to that,
Yeah.
I make it a point in any time I am running a game to have fidget items at the table. The first time I really DM'd, I was DMing for my, at the time, 14-year-old cousin and two of my friends. My cousin, he was pretty focused, but he could be bouncing around. And then my two friends have very bad ADHD. So I specifically said, hey, you know, please keep your phones off, blah, blah, blah. To help you with that, I put a bunch of stuff on the table. They all took to it. It was immensely helpful.
That beats dice stacking as a thing to do.
Yeah,
because
right.
that rattle when they fall is super annoying.
If you don't provide your own fidgets, the dice become the fidgets.
Yeah, and they end up all over.
I feel really called out right now.
You're seen, not called out.
Hey, one other thing that I'd throw out to you is, as an adult, right, I feel you on sometimes Zoom is the only way that you're getting that game in. We always have like a morning after meta, and what kicks off our morning after meta game discussion is a recap, right? And it may help you if you're the person who you know you're going to post that recap, you're going to put that written recap out there for your party. That might help you kind of stay a little bit more locked and dialed into what's going on, and now you're maybe taking notes because you're interested in putting out a really solid recap.
Yeah.
That's something that we use, you know.
I like that, I guess.
That is really sneaky, but I like that a lot. And actually, I just realized one of my group in just my home game, that's probably why they're doing that. I mean, why they take notes. Because I have a couple of the artists that are also in there too, and they're usually sketching or working on stuff that's going on in the scene. Just their, so I don't know if it's helping them envision or whatever, but it's also keeping them focused.
Yeah.
But then other people are taking notes with that kind of stuff. That's good. It's good. I like that.
All the way at the back. You've been so patient.
Just to kind of build and kind of put all these things together, as someone with raging ADHD myself, then this is a skill that I pass on to like all of my kids, is to figure out what is going to work for you. I cannot listen to you if I am not doing something with my hands. That's why I literally always have some sort of sewing project or something, because it's something that I do not have to think about, that I can do with my hands. So like that could be fidgets, that could be drawing, that could be taking notes, but figuring out what is going to work for you. And then like when I have my kids that I'm working with, what is going to work for them?
This is sort of a general thing, maybe a little bit outside of the box. By having all these just sort of mixed age groups, what have you observed or noticed by having that dynamic, not having siblings, but working with people of different ages?
Yeah.
What have you seen other students learn? What have you seen by working with other different age range? How does that add things to the mix of having, instead of having this sort of peer-to-peer, where you're only talking to your fellow peers, you're talking to people of different age range and having to communicate, learn, be patient, maybe recognize someone younger than you has amazing skills. What can you summarize some of that experience?
Yeah, I have a little brother, and I've always kind of been good with kids. So I enjoy playing with younger kids because sometimes I feel like a little 10-year-old boy myself. So it's just fun to be able to act like that, but also be able to be like, hey guys, we need to stay on topic. It helps guide them, get them help them stay engaged and also be able to, act with people like
You
mine.
find it satisfying.
It is
that
certainly
role.
satisfying, yes.
And I myself, I always find that anytime you put a bunch of different people together, they're going to start blending and sharing ideas and knowing each other more and collaborating with each other more, building that level of being able to communicate with each other freely and in a way that feels comfortable and normal. And I feel that something like D&D or any other tabletop roleplay game really is that great equalizer of bringing everyone together, and everyone is equally as important to the story, and that really helps bring everyone together.
Can I play off that, Mel, for a second?
Yeah, of course.
And this might not be an answer to your question, but it is something that I think we need to, as gamers, and I guess I'm assuming everybody here games, right? But like this way,
That's what this is?
sorry, buddy, get out. That's what is so unique about this way of telling a story, right? Looking at this from like asking kids to write. I ask kids to write essays. I ask kids to write persuasive essays. I ask kids to do historical research. I ask kids to do a lot of writing. Looking at how we tell stories here, right? As a DM, I set the scene. The players, right? They come in with an idea of what they're going to do, and then the dice screw both of us, right? Like, this is such a unique way of telling a story that is nowhere else. It's something special that we do as gamers. And it is a special way of telling a story that I think tickles parts of our brain and our personality and our skill sets that are unlikely to be tickled anywhere else. One of the things Theo said on the way down was that, like, you read a book. The person writing the book did all the work, you're just imagining it. You watch a movie, right? You're playing in somebody else's imagination. You play a video game, you're just making decisions within somebody else's imagination game. This is something unique that we all create together. There's not a lot of things that are like that. It's really special.
Sorry, one thing I meant to ask also is when you're doing this stuff, especially with these large combats like this, are you using any kind of visual? Are you using a tabletop? It's all theater of mind?
And here's why. If it turns into using, it becomes really difficult to track, right? Because now I need this huge amphitheater where the combat happens.
Sure.
I need AOE spells to not impact other tables because that can't happen, right? So it's all theater of the mind, and that's impressed on the DMs early on, right? This is not dictatorial school. This is rule of cool. Everybody is leaving here having a good time, or you screwed up. Right? So that is important to me, that I don't want any DMs who are just like trying to stick it to the players. I want it to be rule of cool. I want the players to trust their DMs so that the DMs can make those decisions without doing the visuals. We've had people run like Roll20 on a big board or something, and it's worked just fine. But especially for the big combat, it's got to be theater of the mind.
So as far as the DMM, are you like tracking where all the other groups are in general, though? I mean, just for yourself to be like, all right, I can't know that they're over here, and those guys are like maybe like another 5 minutes before they capture them.
Yeah. So like, my dream, if I could get highly motivated DMs who do what I ask. Thus far, that has not happened, but it's my dream. Is to have everybody in a shared document add their story arcs, so that then I can harmonize them, and then I can do an as played. Right? Okay. But that's never happened. Like, I've gotten the first couple pages of everybody's story arcs, and then they get busy, and then they're just doing it by the seat of their pants. Everybody still having a good time, whatever. Who cares, right? But like, my dream is to do that, so I could actually track where people are, and that would make that simultaneity and that feeling of cohesiveness and being in the same universe at the same time a lot better. As it is, it's just a couple of minutes at the end of the session, the DMs come over, I'm like, well, where did you guys get to? Where did you guys get to? Anything happen at your table that I need to know about, right? And then we'd all sort of share that, and the goal is for next week, you to use something from somebody else's table, right? So like when Danny DeVito sent everybody out to go to join their gangs, right? I wanted everybody to have the same Danny DeVito. If you run into Danny DeVito in that part of town, I want that to have an impact at this table over here. You know what I mean? I could have just done 5 separate incidences of the exact same adventure. But then what do the kids talk about away from the table?
Right.
In my adventure, we fought the big rubber ducky. In my adventure, we got the mayonnaise jar. That's BS. That's false. It takes you out of the game. This idea of simultaneity lets kids have something to really discuss and try to put the pieces together. right? Both of the ones that I've run thus far have been kind of mysteries, where like there's clues buried at every table for what's going to actually happen at the end, right? I had a heel turn at the end where this, impeccably good character who sent the kids on the fetch quest turned out to be an evil person. But there's clues, in everybody's adventure arc that when they talked outside of outside of Game Club, some of them started to put together that maybe this wasn't such a good idea, Not enough to actually screw up my adventure, thank God, but they started to suspect that maybe there was a problem. It didn't catch them entirely by surprise, That was what I wanted. I wanted it to be an experience that they were having together.
And using your persistent universe stuff, so that like you got the callbacks and things, are you ever having it so that like if group A goes through this part of town and the other group goes through and then like maybe goes through that part of town and then goes off this way, but when they go through there, like they can see that it's already been torn up and this kind of stuff, or shopkeepers are like, oh, it's more of those guys.
More of those guys. Didn't like them the first one.
Right.
We haven't had that happen yet, just because of how these adventure arcs have played out.
Okay.
For this year where we're in the walled city, I've tried to keep people located in neighborhoods. It's a big enough city that there's like discrete neighborhoods. So they're not bumping into each other too much. The first one I did on the island, one of the DMs created these two border guards, Bertram and Ernest. Who were Bernie, right? So then, like, he created them just to keep himself amused. It was just something funny he did, right? So my group had to cross that same border. Well, they met Bertram and Ernest, right? And that Bert was highly suspicious in guarding his paperclip collection, Right? It just had to be. I can't not do that, right? So then those characters come back. That's kind of what I mean by those callbacks. Because I want the kids from this table to have an experience of Bert and Ernie, and I want the kids at this table to have that same experience. So when Bert and Ernie show up at the end, they're like, I know those guys! Again, it makes them feel like they're in the same world.
Back to your question. I'm sitting here and I'm reflecting the changes that I've seen in my son, right? So he started gaming probably in the 7 to 8 range. And so I've seen his communication style change. He is a more effective communicator orally, right, in the ideas that he's putting out there. One of the really interesting things that I've seen shift in my son, because, right, when you're 7 and 8, everybody you're playing with is older than you, right? Whether it's your parents, whether it's, your older buddies. I'm going to use that term egocentric again. His play experience as a young child was very, very, very egocentric. And that translated across to his early attempts to run, which I think is really interesting, right? Running is storytelling. So he had a story, he wanted to get that story out, and his young, early attempts at running was very much
what he wanted to do.
Right, it was the DM shit, right? And as he has gotten older and played with older people, I've watched his gaming style, his play style, and in particular his run style, shift away from that egocentric focus to be better at incorporating others' ideas and others' narratives. So that has been a really interesting development for me to see in him as a parent, to watch that cognitive change or watch that cognitive shift. The other thing that I've seen, I've got to watch him run his younger sister, right? There's about 2 years difference between he and his sister. And there are varying degrees to which on any given day he is concerned with her having an enjoyable play experience, right? That's that sibling thing going on. But when he is really concerned with running in a way that gives her as a player a really fulfilling player experience, I can see him employing just some better listening, some more empathy, watch him do some facilitation in teaching, right? Especially explaining some of the rules, which I think is that is the growth and development we see when we place young people in positions of leadership, right? So I think that that's really cool to see it as well. Those are some of the changes that I see occur with that heterogeneous age structure. That's all.
I think it's the last question. You get it.
Okay. So much more pressure.
We can have one more.
So you mentioned that you do the cross play of like all 4 tables or whatever all at once at the end.
Yeah.
Would you consider doing it at various points throughout the campaign where a table or 2 would interact with each other?
We could do, I mean, that's the thing about a fantasy world. We could do anything you want, right? It just made the most sense to me in the context of fighting the big baddie at the end. But if I had DMs who were like, I really want to have a foot race, or I want, you know what I mean? Like, whatever, man, let's do it. I think that that's what's cool about this rule tweak, is it just backs you up one level and allows you to do crazy things like that, right? One of the worries I had doing this was that I would end up with a bunch of PC combat, which is never bueno, right? But I think if we could figure out any way to any context where that makes sense, like, yeah, let's do it, right? The system works however.
Right, so there's no practical reason why you don't do it more often. It's just...
Other than it's time consuming, right? And it's chaotic, and I need, like I'm in a room like this, so if I've got 5 tables playing relatively quietly in this room, that's fine. If I've got 5 tables screaming and yelling, it's pretty hectic, right? So we don't get a ton done during that time. But yeah, I think that you could adapt this to anything, and when you do, drop me an email and let me know how you use it, because I want to know what to do next year. I want to know that rowing race that I'm going to be doing, that you came up with or whatever. All the tables are playing with. See, I told you it wasn't the last question. Yeah.
Bouncing off each other. So we've been talking about doing some type of community-based D&D group for teens or young adults. So my kind of 2-part question is, do you think that's something that is needed / as teens up there you would be willing to engage in or look for? And just any considerations you might have for us to do a group within a community setting.
So were you asking if you think that there should be more D&D groups available for teens?
Yeah, like there's some like out in the community, because I know it's sometimes harder with like rides and access locations, but if there's something after school or in evenings or later nights or on weekends or something that teens could drop in and hang out and do and maybe have an awesome DM, is that something that they're looking for more activities essentially?
Oh yeah, I would love to see more people playing D&D. I find it really fun, and I think that I want to play it more, and I don't get to because my neighbor lives 10 miles down the road, let alone my best friend. So, I think that would be great if you could get some place for people to get together and play D&D.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I'm often stuck inside because where I go to school is entirely separate from where I live, and so I don't really have a sense of my community in the sense of where I live or where I go to school, and so most of the people I interact with is through that shared setting of schooling. And so I think it's definitely necessary for anyone who has any sort of experience with anything like that.
And I would say, as far as like starting, that building that culture where everybody's respectful is going to be probably a little bit more out front for you guys. Right, and setting up that X card system, setting up expectations and what's inbounds and what's outbounds. These are kids who basically all know each other, and they're all known quantities. I think if you're dealing with a random selection, you guys are going to have to set that tone.
Right, a lot more fundamentals.
And don't. Yeah.
So for context, our school runs about 1,000 K-12, PK-12, right? So we'll run. In small cohorts, 60 a class, right? And in big cohorts, maybe 80, maybe 90 in a class. But that's a long way of saying, look, we got about 450 to 500 kids in the building, and we know them all by name.
Yeah.
Right? So that is maybe easier on that scale for us to achieve and attain the culture that we want and have a little bit more preformed social connection when kids are gathering around the table. than say if I was trying to export this or install this in New York City's public library.
I would also say don't be afraid to start small.
Yeah.
And let those kids, because it's a snowball, right? That's what happens to me every year. I've got 20 kids who show up. I'll have 25 the next week because this kid said it was an awesome time. So starting small and getting that core of kids who are going to be the leaders is a strong play. And that goes a long way to setting that culture for the reasons that we talked about with mentoring, right? So that small core group of maybe 4 players who then become the leaders, who become those DMs if you decide to adopt my stupid rule system, right? Like those kids end up setting the tone for the other kids, and they end up bringing the kids in, which is way more effective than, milk carton advertising. Thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun.